Hello and welcome to The Den. Welcome to the first episode of a series I like to call Den and Now, where we take a look at old and nostalgic media and see how it's held up to the test of time. Kick off your shoes and grab your wands, because today we're going to take a look at one of the first games in the wizarding world of Harry Potter. Don't go anywhere, this is Den and Now. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone actually goes by two different names depending on which region of the world you live in. In the United States, India, and the Philippines, it's Sorcerer's Stone, and in the UK and other markets, it's Philosopher's Stone. Being the US, I've always known it as Sorcerer's Stone, so for the sake of my own personal convenience, it shall be referred to as such for the remainder of the video. The original game release was published in 2001 on November 16th, the same day that the movie premiered in the United States. This initial release of the game made it onto the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, PlayStation, and PC. 2 years later, in December of 2003, a completely different game by the same name was released on the GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox systems. I think it's important to mention that this was the era of video game development with IP titles on different systems from different developers, and save for the newer GameCube, PS2, and Xbox versions, every other version of this game is vastly different. While the PC and PlayStation versions share the most similarities, they were still developed by different studios and have differences in story progression and gameplay. For the sake of nostalgia and juxtaposition to the new Wizarding World game releasing at the end of this year, we're going to be taking a look at the original 2001 PC release. With the original release licensing being split among many different studios, game versions, and systems, the game as a whole has fallen by the wayside in the form of abandonware. I imagine the copyright and licensing was just too much to navigate for EA to bring this onto Origin or other modern PC game platforms. So, if you're looking for the game there, you'll be out of luck. You can, however, pick up an old copy from eBay for a reasonable price. There are some minor compatibility considerations on the PC version, especially with modern machines. The resolution, being that of a game in the early 2000s, will look like doo-doo on newer 2K and 4K monitors as it blows up the 720p NTSC picture to fit a screen that can handle triple that. Nothing that a little Alt-Enter can't fix to make it windowed, though. During this experience, it was important for me to stay in the mindset of this being a 2001 title. It's quite easy to take a look at a game on its face and compare it to today's standards. So, putting on my most objective analyst hat, let's dive in. The soundtrack is definitely on brand with the Harry Potter theme of wonder and mystical creatures. Jeremy Soule, the lead composer of this project, went on to compose the scores for Elder Scrolls, Guild Wars, and many others, so this comes as no surprise. Roaming the halls of Hogwarts to the playful soundtrack in the background brought out the same emotions as the movie's soundtrack, composed by the legendary John Williams. Graphically speaking, the game doesn't look that bad. The colors used are vibrant and saturated enough to give Hogwarts and the surrounding environments life enough to feel like we are in the wizarding world. The long corridors of Hogwarts are artfully decorated and have plenty of secrets to uncover. Early 3D titles of this era sport very similar graphical capabilities and utilize clever tricks to make the world seem more vast and cohesive. With a fixation on higher resolution textures and less on polygon count, these games were able to achieve an environment that the players could immerse themselves in, with this being no exception. With all that said, there were certainly plenty of moments where the rendering simply didn't deliver on my newer machine. This is likely user error on my part and I misconfigured something, but since I had a heck of a time just getting the game to run in the first place, I decided not to look a gift horse in the mouth. If you have any tips for getting older games to run on newer machines, please drop a comment below or send me a tweet at TheDenYT on Twitter. The story of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone surprisingly comes through in this game. All the main events of the story are there, from Hagrid finding the dragon egg, to the troll in the girl's bathroom, and finally the showdown with He Who Shall Not Be Named. Throughout the game, you're asked to collect as many of Bertie Bott's every flavor bean that you find by Ron's older brothers Fred and George. While they don't say immediately what the beans are for, if you collect enough to give them the beans they need each time they appear, you'll be treated to a short scene after the main game is completed of the brothers playing a prank on Professor Snape at the end. Overall, the game hits all of the main plot points of the first installment in the series, and it didn't leave me wanting for much more. I was surprised by this fact since the game came out on the same day as the movie in the United States as a pairing, and a lot of the models bore enough of a resemblance to their actor portrayals in the movie. Now, that's not to say that one can replace either the movie or the book by just playing this game. I clocked a bit under 6 hours of gameplay to complete this game, and the main event seemed pretty fragmented by the gameplay sections and sometimes rushed altogether, especially towards the end of the game. Alright, let's talk about magic. It's a Harry Potter game, so of course there's a heavy focus on your arsenal spells in this game. Learning the spells on the PC version on paper sounds like a great idea. Your instructor shows you a general shape and the spell associated with that shape. You then take your mouse cursor and trace that shape as accurately and as quickly as you can. The problem is with the mouse support. Mouse sensitivity is something that you can change in the game's options, however, I never really found the sweet spot. I struggled to come to terms so much with the game's mouse controls that I eventually opted out of using them altogether, relying solely on the D-pad, WASD, spacebar, and Control and Alt keys. This, however, is not an option when it comes to learning the spells, so the end result was this. After learning the spells, I was very disappointed to learn that there was no mechanism to change which spell I'm casting. And in fact, there's only one spell button in this entire game, and that button changes behavior based on what you're aiming at. If you're looking at a pillar, Flipendo! If you're looking at a gnome, Flipendo! And if you're looking at a switch on the wall, you guessed it, Flipendo. It may as well be called Harry Potter Practices Flipendo. Lumos, Alohomora, Incendio, and of course, Wingardium Leviosa make an appearance, but are only a fraction of the screen time that Flipendo gets. This issue is further compounded with the game's idea of puzzles. Since the game only requires that you press the one magic button that automatically selects a spell based on whatever you're looking at, these segments feel very hollow. I don't feel like I'm actually contributing any intellect or problem-solving abilities when playing through these segments. And I fully realize that this game's target audience was children, but come on. If the game instead asks you to flip through a book of spells, forcing you to cast that spell at whatever you're looking at, then this wouldn't be a problem. Instead, we're given the illusion of variety here, in an environment that is almost impossible to be stuck in. Let's not forget that weapon selection has been a staple of action platforming video games since the late 80s on the NES. With the freedom of a mouse and keyboard, they most certainly had the extra buttons to be able to pull this off. Let's spare a thought for the other half of this gameplay, which is the platforming. The game has no strafe actions under normal circumstances, and this makes the platforming rather difficult at times, especially when you're asked to use these magic platforms to get to your destination. Harry can run, jump, and climb just like the able-bodied preteen that he is, but the overall clunkiness of the platforming can leave a bad taste in your mouth during the game's final stretch. Towards the end, you're sneaking about the Forbidden Corridor as you elude the watchful gazes of Argus Filch and Mrs. Norris, and this was the only section of the game where I felt truly challenged. They really should have done more with this theme. The added pressure of making tight jumps in a small time frame during patrol routes adds some much-needed urgency and excitement to the game's otherwise lackluster performing. 2001's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone for PC was a delightful trip down memory lane for me. Despite my misgivings about the controls and gameplay, it was fun to relive a moment in time when Harry Potter wasn't the international sensation it is today. While I had fun in this adventure, there are certainly better versions of the game out there, namely the 2003 release on the then next-gen consoles. If a friend of mine asked me if they should pick up this game, I would probably tell them no unless they wanted to preserve a piece of gaming history, as this is no longer sold in stores or supported by any online retailers. I think it's fascinating how far video games have come as a whole, but more importantly the evolution of the Harry Potter franchise to where we are today with the new installment releasing later this year. As excited as I am to play that game, I'll have a few choice words for the developer if they decide to bring back the Flipendo spell. Thank you so much for joining me on today's first episode of Den and Now. If you liked the video, please click that like button and consider subscribing. I'm new to content creation, so I would love your feedback. Drop a comment below, or you can reach out to me on Twitter @TheDenYT. You can also catch me recording footage for this series on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/DenAfterDark. Until next time, peace!